Hey, welcome, folks. It's Friday night. This is Scotty Roberts. Welcome to the program. It is, just adjusting a couple of things so you can see me all the better. And, folks, welcome to the show. It's Friday night, and this is Scotty Roberts, and you're watching the Intrepid radio program right here on my YouTube channel. And normally seen on Odyssey Radio, ODYSY1.com. And we're not over on Odyssey tonight, and we will be off Odyssey in audio format only on the radio network until we have a few more things set up on this end, but that's coming very shortly. And so welcome to the YouTube channel. I want to tell you how much I appreciate you taking your time to come in and spend it here with me. And let's see if we can do you some honor and justice tonight by giving you a good show. And you are here in the chat room as well to participate in this show. Not just listen, but you get to participate to some extent. And I want to thank you for being here. And I want to say welcome to Matt Finn. Master Finn, how you doing this evening, brother? Glad to see you here. And of course, Steve Clark, hanging in there for warmer weather. Today, here in Lake Charles, Louisiana, we had a high of 47 degrees, 47, hovering around zero to upper 20s yesterday. We had 47, and there wasn't a cloud in the sky. So the sun was just beating down on everything, and you felt that warmth coming. And we were walking around in just a sweater like this. I didn't even have to put on my jacket today. So it was very nice. And pretty much all the snow and ice is gone. And tomorrow it's going to be, I think they said 54 is going to be the high tomorrow. So this part of the country that's been frigid for the last few days is finally emerging from that. And so, Steve, I hope you're doing the same over there in Kansas. And Beth Kirkham, good to see you. Welcome to the show tonight. Field guy, Snow, what's that? Field guy? Yeah, we should send you some or bring you some over. Of course, it's almost all gone now. So Roger Rabbit, good you're here. CW, good to see you. Claire, let's see who else we got. We got anybody else in that I haven't said hello to yet? Not yet. Not in the chat room anyway. And so I want to welcome all of you here that are here on a Friday evening in the chat room. And we just had some chicken wings tonight. And I had some that were a little more hotter than I enjoyed. So if I happen to burp during the show, you're going to know why. So, all right. And so what's going on with you guys for a Friday night? I'm about at the end of my week. I haven't had a hard week. It's just been a cold week, and it's been a lot going on. And it's Friday night, and you start to go, I think I'm starting to kick back inside a little bit. And so I hope you are too. And so there, now they've got some minor adjustments out of the way. Let's move forward. Bookworm, Kevin, good to see you. Mr. Miller, nice to have you in here tonight. And Claire's having pizza right now. And so Field Guy, yeah, there you go. Coming with the sound effects. And what did I want to remind you of here at the beginning of the show? Oh, if you are not a member of the channel, go on over, hit the join button down below, and you become a member. You can become a member of this channel. You can see the 3 different ways to do that. Also, a little promotion. If you would like to go over to my Etsy page and see all the cool garments and gear and merchandise we have that is formed up around this show and all the different topics we've done, I've tried to do a design on a shirt for every one of the topics that we've covered. Well, most of them anyway. And so you can go on over to my Etsy page. It's etsy.com/shop/son of a patriot. And you can see all the goods that we have going there. And thank you, Matt Finn, for putting that in the chat room. And you can also go over to my website, scottallenroberts.com, and see all that's going on over at the website. and you can see the work that I do, the graphics, the books I do, and a little bit about me if you're interested and you don't know, and all different kinds of things going on, and links over at my website to all the stuff I do. And that's it. And now I got a little update for you. Remember how I've been telling you for almost 2 years now that my publisher and I had a conversation about doing a book on the book of Enoch, amongst other things. And I've been working on my novel for my agent, the 10 Breaths of Ra. I'm not sure I'm going to change that title yet or not, but that was always been the working title. And as I finished that up, I just had a conversation with my publisher, which is New Page Books. They're still going by, but owned as I believe now an imprint of Red Wheel Weiser Hampton Roads Books. And they want me to write this book of Enoch. And so we talked about the direction they wanted to see that go, what kind of content they wanted to see, because, the kind of books that they publish. And so uh, we talked about that in great detail. They hammered down some dates. And also, they want to take my book, The Rise and Fall of the Nephilim, and do a second edition. And so my publisher wanted to talk to me about what I felt wanted to be changed in that book, any additions I wanted to make, any new chapters I might want to add. And so we talked about that in a lot of detail. And that's another thing that they want me to do because they want to release a second edition of that. That was my first book with them that came out in 2012. And so we're going to update. That's had a lot of long legs over the last 8, 9 years. And so they want to see that one updated. Pardon me while I make a couple of adjustments to camera and lights. And so we had a very productive conversation this week. So those things are going to be starting to kick into higher gear. So that's some good news. Thank you, Roger. And thank you very much. I appreciate that. CW was just looking at Enoch yesterday and today. Coincidence? Coincidence? Maybe not. And one thing I said about the book of Enoch is that it's like the Old Testament on crack because there's so much crazy stuff in that book that took place. Yet, it was a book that was quoted by several of the Old Testament authors, the minor prophets, and not several, a few of them. It was quoted by the Apostle Paul in the New Testament. It was also quoted by none other than Jesus himself in the Gospels. So it was a book that people have claimed is much, it's not as old as they say it. Well, that was only written in, like the 400s or something like that. Well, those were copies of that book. That book was quoted from back in the time of Jesus, quoted back in the time of the pre-intertestamental period. And so it's very interesting stuff. So it's going to be, yeah, I did Iowa X. Boy, you catch on real quick. You hear the right stuff at the right moment. So, well, thanks, Beth Kirkham. I appreciate that. Let's say hypothetically, I get them a finished book by September on Enoch. You won't see that on the news or in the bookstores or to order until the following September. It takes about a year to go from completion of book to published book. So that'll be neat to see. Audrey, good to see you. Glad you're in here. Miss seeing you. So I'm glad to have you here tonight. And my brain is tired tonight. So you're going to have to work with me a little bit tonight. If you have to fill in the gaps a little bit. I feel squinty eyed tonight. And it's not like, my little boy Flynn used to give you we called it the Clint eye. Well, you want me to clean my room? Do ya, punk? So that's the way I feel, though. My eyes are squinty tonight. So, but we're going to move forward with great bravado anyway. there is, you know how last night I was talking about some of the things that people write on the internet, some of the hate that people put across in their zeal to hop on the let's celebrate the death of Rush Limbaugh wagon. And that kind of stuff keeps going on. I keep seeing people saying things that are ridiculous. I put up a little, it's not an ad, just promoting because I'm glad to see it. I like Katie Pavlich. You see her on Fox News. She's a good looking blonde woman, but at the same time, could probably intellect most of us under the table, like a drinking contest, drink you under the table. I said that, and a buddy of mine said she could do what to us under the table? I said, no, 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 no. I said, intellect us under the table. A play on words, not an entendre. But I put up, she's got a new book, and it's Katie Pavlich wrote it, and it's Assault and Flattery. It's called Assault and Flattery. It's subtitled The Truth About the Left and Their War on Women. And I'm going to tell you this, nobody's paid me to say this. I was just talking about the book and promoting, and I took their promo of the book. And this is the promo. New York Times best-selling author and Fox News contributor Katie Pavlich exposes the truth behind the real war on women, the one being waged by, wait for it, Democrats. Assault and Flattery, the title of the book, goes beyond the Democratic Party's rhetoric and exposes its shocking and sustained assault on American women that has lasted for generations. And in some cases, the word assault is quite literal. Katie Pavlich thinks the Democrats have run the conversations for too long, and she's out to debunk the sacred cows of the so called Republican war on women. Now, conservatives are raving about assault and flattery. You got a bunch of conservative pundits and radio people and television people that are saying a lot about it. Mark Levine calls it, does he go by Levin or Levine? I think he's Mark Levine. Mark Levin. He calls it a thorough and gutsy book that should help set history straight. Michelle Malkin calls it a tour de force, bold, beautiful, and brilliant. Sean Hannity calls Katie one of the America's top conservative reporters. And Monica Crowley says she blows the lid off the lies that the left tells women. Now, in Assault and Flattery, Katie Pavlich explains that what the Democratic Party is doing to women is doing to us all. By segregating us by gender, they're harming our futures. And so you can go take a look at this. I pulled that right from the Amazon site. And go take a look at Katie's book, Assault and Flattery. I'm going to read that. I have not read it myself, but I need to go read it. But I like Katie Pavlich, and I've always liked it. You know, of course, as a guy, we talked about this last week a little bit. A guy pleasing to the eyes, probably to women too. But beyond that, it's nice to see somebody that is as established as she is, that she is a great thinker, and she's pretty hard hitting and point matter of fact. And so I like listening to what she has to say. So this is her new book, and I'm going to probably put an order in to get that book. And yeah, only my views apply. If you're talking to me, Matt Finn. Hey, Scott Lowry, good to see you. And so there's that book, and I think it's going to be a very interesting topic to see what she has to say is the real war on women. There's a lot of rhetoric going on out there, and there's political rhetoric, as we all know. Doesn't matter what side of the political spectrum you're on. If you can step outside the box, everybody listening here tonight, you can look at the political box, the political game box, and step out of it and look back in. You don't have to abandon your beliefs or your political ideologies, but if you look back in from the outside, you're going to be able to see something that looks very different than when you just that then when you don't use just your political ideology or your political loyalties to govern the answer to your questions or to govern the way you think about something. And so I don't know where I was going with that because my brain's not working right tonight. But at the same time, I would encourage you to pick that up if it's a thing in your field of interest. You want to know more about what she has to say. I think that she is probably a very good person to listen to. So there you go. There's that. And I wanted to put that out there for you to take a look at. And also, many of you see some of the stuff that goes on my internet posts and my pages. I used to say that, no, that's a wrong way to start that sentence. I would say that I've said for a long time that I've tried to avoid getting overtly political with my posts. And people say, oh, pshaw, you do not, because I have a lot of political posts up there. But mostly those political posts that you're seeing aren't me pontificating about politics as much as it is me, sharing an article. Say, hey, what do you think of this? And from this point of view. And I'm looking right now. I'm just scrolling through some of my posts on my Facebook page. The Katie Pavlich post is about as close as I get to anything political today. But I did do a lot of talking with people who like to take me to task for some of the things that I say and some of the beliefs I make. Do you know that there are people out there that believe that I go out of my way to belittle people for their political beliefs, belittle them as people, call them names, attack them, and that there are people out there that say, this is what I do, and that this is what I'm all about. And I've had a lot of people where I've said, hey, you know what? You go ahead and show me where I've said anything like this. If I'm doing it all the time, it should be really easy for you to go out there and grab one instance where you see me doing that. Now, just today, now maybe you could call this a political post. Today, I put up an old picture of Errol Flynn in the 1930, I want to say it was 37 to 39. I can't remember. The original Robin Hood with Errol Flynn was made in the late 30s. And it was color movie. And I put up a picture of him, and it's when he's inside the castle and he's shooting his bow. He's got his sword strapped to his belt. He's shooting an arrow, and I put, arrows don't kill people. Arrows just leave them incapacitated while you finish them off with your sword. And of course, it's meant to mock all the new gun control things that are being talked about. And I got to tell you, there's a point where I get really tired of what I'm seeing happening right now in politics. So I comment about it sometimes. Sometimes I poke fun at it. Um, I don't think I've ever poked fun at Joe Biden as much as I have made fun of some of the things that he's saying and policies that he's making. I've always said of Joe Biden, used to like Joe Biden down through the years. I've said it on this show a couple of times, is that I always saw him as somebody that probably wanted to be out of politics. He never reached his ambition. He tried to run for president twice and didn't make it. And um, I see him as somebody who, especially after the death of his son, that he just was done. I saw him as somebody that was like, okay, I'm going to finish out my term as vice president, and I'm going to be done. And I'm going to go fishing. I'm going to retire and do things that guys in their mid to late 70s do. And yet, um, I believe he got pulled back into this thing, kind of kicking and screaming. But I also blame the left. I think that Joe Biden got pulled into this because they knew that they could control what he did. And the they, who's the ubiquitous they? I think that you see all this stuff that's being attributed to Biden. Biden's doing this now, Biden's doing that. I have an opinion that it's probably not Biden at all. I think he's along for the ride. I think he is made to believe that these are his ideas. I think he probably believes in some of it, but I believe with all the things that he is doing, with a man who is declining a bit. I don't think that he is that powerfully driven. And this is my opinion on having watched him over the last several years. So I think he is President Biden by proxy. That you're seeing Biden is the face of probably a left or more progressive movement that wants to achieve something. And so I find that boy, I said it to somebody today, and I'll step out on a limb and say this might be insulting to some. Um, and this is a paraphrase of something that I heard somebody say when Obama was running for his second term. People said if he gets a second term, he's going to destroy America forever. And now in retrospect, we survived. But I heard one pundit say, and I'll tell you who it was Rush Limbaugh. He said, I have no fear of an Biden presidency or even a second term. He says, I don't fear that Obama will ruin this nation. He says, what I fear is an electorate, a citizenry who would vote him in a second time. That tells me people are not thinking clearly. Now, that would all by itself insult some of you who like liked Obama, and the Biden ticket. And some of you that may now like Biden, and maybe he's doing the things you want to see him do. I tend to believe that his agenda is going to be something that is going to, boy, when I see things like $50 billion going to Iran, that's bothersome to me. And basically, Biden has said, "You promise us now, promise us on a stack of Korans." You know, I'm telling the truth. What is it to, or hope to die? Boil me in oil if I'm telling a lie. But Biden is saying to Iran, basically, you give us your word that you'll stop plutonium development, uranium development, and we'll give you this 50 billion. But you know what's going on? Iran is also not allowing any first contact, if you will, between the president, Biden, and the Iranian government. They're doing it all through foreign proxies. So the United States is not going to have any first hands on negotiating with Iran. Yet this is something that just cost taxpayers $50 billion. Do you trust Iran with your money? Do you trust death to America, Iran, with your money? So there you go. That's the kind of stuff I look at. I start looking at that and I look at all the decisions that are being made. And I say, I would state emphatically that I believe it's bad for our nation. But you might be on the other side of that political spectrum and want to express something completely different. And I didn't mean to talk about politics tonight. I meant to talk about a principle there, and it's lost in there somewhere. So there you go. So I'm going to skip going any further on that. That was impromptu anyway. So, oh, and I see there's some stuff going on over there. Rogers has had to run for a seizure back now. If you all could send some positive vibes this way. Kinsey had 30 plus seizures this evening alone. I saw something. Did you say this earlier, Roger? Or did I see something? No, I saw something from Carly this morning talking about how Kinsey was having seizures all morning. And she's sleeping soundly again now, though. Boy, my heart goes out to you guys. That's got to be tough. So let's send some healing energy, healing thoughts, the power of healing thinking, the power of intention out for Kinsey and for Roger and Carly tonight. So I wish you guys the best. And Sarah Nichols Media, welcome. Good to see you. Hey, Sarah, you'll have to answer something in private for me. You can do it here in public if you want. I'm seeing over the last couple of weeks, I've noticed I've gotten all kinds of friend requests from different versions of you. And I don't know if they're all you or not. I haven't written to you about it yet. I haven't taken the time to ask you, but I just saw you there and it made me think of that. It's over on my Instagram, some of them on my Facebook. And I don't know if you've got any more than one profile on either one of those. So you can let me know. You can let me know here. You can let me know in private. Just thought of it, and since I saw you there in the chat room, I thought I'd ask you. I hope there's only one you out there. So there you go. So I've got all kinds of friend requests from different versions of what looks like you. So let me know. Because I thought, well, I'm your friend. I'm not going to add five more of you. So, or three more of you, or whatever, if that's not really you. So there you go. Blah, blah, blah. Copied accounts, FB, Instagram does that. I wondered. They're not using her name, but they're using other names. So I was just curious. And I am familiar with that being done. It's happened to me over the years too. So lots of scam requests on FB lately, CW says. So there you go. All right. Tonight, I wanted us to get back a little bit into this final episode on the Dark Triad. Is anybody out there confused as to what the Dark Triad is? When I mention Dark Triad and we talk about narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy, and you put all those together, and these all reveal these traits. Many of you took the test and were sending me some of your results, and you aired some of those here. I think my phone has been hacked lately, says Steve. Steve, you don't have a Facebook account, do you? I think you're just over here on Instagram. I'm sorry, on YouTube. Do you have an Instagram account by any chance? And so this dark triad stuff, we looked at it. We talked about the sexual side of that last night, and how the dark triad how it affects sexuality. But tonight, I kind of wanted to hit, and some of this is going to be repetitive information. You're going to have heard some of this as we lay the groundwork for this, but just a little bit on the whole anti-hero side of the dark triad. Only YouTube. Okay, Steve, that's good to know. I haven't gotten any friend requests from you. That's I just wondered. So Iowa X says, I only get friend requests from hot Russian women. It's all totally legit. You know, way back, I got all kinds of internet stuff from a Russian woman, gorgeous, hot little Russian woman. This was back in, oh my goodness, 2003, 2004. So, we're talking, this is just pre rainy time. And 16, 17, 18 years ago, some of this. I even got a letter in the mail with this beautiful. Have you ever seen a Ukrainian or a Russian write in English? They have this almost their language, the Cyrillic alphabet look to their American letters. It's gorgeous handwriting. I saved the letter. I've got it somewhere. And I was sent a photograph of this woman and sent a handwritten letter and how so much they wanted to fall in love with me and come over to America and live in America and so on. And um, now, just anecdotally, my stepdad, when I was a kid, a little kid, from the time I was about 2 until I was 6, my mom was married to this fellow, Vasil Nikolajenko, and that's where my sister came from. Technically my half sister, but we never saw it that way. And so Nikolajenko, he was Ukrainian and spoke with a heavy accent the whole time I knew him. He passed away not 10 years ago, 8 years ago, maybe. And he was in his 80s, and he slipped and fell down his own stairs in North Minneapolis in his basement and probably laid on the floor for 2 or 3 days before anybody noticed. I mean, my sister would call him most every day, and she noticed for a couple of days he wasn't picking up, so she got really worried, and some neighbors went, or then I don't remember all the circumstances, but my sister was very close to him, and so He had had a heart attack, they thought, and fell down the stairs. He was alive. She went and visited him in the hospital, and they talked a little bit. He passed into a coma and passed away. Well, I was familiar. I only brought that up because I brought it up when I thought of the writing and the hand style of writing. And so, yeah, I got letters like that, Iowa, from Russian women. You have like 10 chained in your basement. They don't even mind the cold weather. That's a good thing about Russian women. They're used to the cold. Get Siberian women if you can. And I don't even remember what my point was with that, other than to say I'm responding to Iowa X. And I don't know if somebody remind me if I was going somewhere else with that. I just sidetracked myself. So anyhow, moving quite along, there is this dark side of the dark triad, and this dark side of heroes, and it's the big question I'm asking with this is why do anti-heroes appeal to people with dark traits? Think of anti-heroes. Can you name some? You know of anti-heroes that are out there? Those anti-heroes, those morally ambiguous characters who uh, are not clearly either good or evil because they do both. They do evil, but they also do good. They're popular protagonists in modern media. And there's a recent study found that people who have this particular affinity for anti-heroes tend to be relatively high in antisocial traits, particularly aggression, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy. And this suggests really that people may particularly enjoy characters who they perceive as being similar to themselves. There's maybe a bunch of us here that say, I could do great good. Oh, if I possessed the ring, I would use it for good. And there's a Pete's over there agreeing with that. You let me have the power of the One Ring, and I would use it as a force for good. But then you have the opposite side of that, which would use it for evil. Batman, somebody said. Field guy said Batman. Yeah, Batman is kind of a dick, isn't he? Batman is somebody who will take out your lights and possibly even kill you, at least in the earlier days. Well, maybe they've come back around to that. He didn't care much for the criminal element, and he didn't quite care much what he did to them, as long as he was stopping them. So he was doing something good, yet he was evil. Iowa X is Darth Vader. I don't know. I don't know so much about Darth Vader. What do you think about Darth Vader, Iowa X? Did you see? I didn't ever see him as a stated force for good. He had that evil side. And I wanted to say, I saw a meme once that showed Alec Guinness, who played old Obi-Wan Kenobi in the first Star Wars movie ever, and he's standing with Mark Hamill playing Luke Skywalker, and it shows him when he's giving him or showing him, or yeah, he gave it to him. His This was your father's lightsaber, and and he hands it to Luke, who turns it on right and goes. He's wielding it around like as irresponsibly as you could wield a weapon like that. The yes, yes, the young wing killer of 1,000, and that's the meme I saw was, well, this is the lightsaber of your father, Anakin Skywalker, who committed genocide of the Sand People with it, which you saw in a later movie. So when Anakin kind of loses it and starts to head to the dark side, and Darth Vader, I don't know so much about Darth Vader being good. Maybe he started that way and went evil, but I don't think he was both at the same time. I don't think he was out to try to do good and yet still do evil. I could use an example of like the Fae, the fairy folk of Irish lore, which, by the way, I'll step out on a limb on this one. I'm going to tell you, I believe exists. I believe that that element of spiritual creature exists just as much as I might believe that an angel exists, or a cherubim, or the devil himself. I believe there was a whole cast of mystical beings that were created beings we call mystical, and I think the Fae were among them. And I've mentioned this before, but I had somebody who worked in exorcism and taught exorcism to. He was flown in to the Vatican to teach about it. Now he wasn't a priest, so he said I can't exorcise because he was devout Catholic. He didn't feel that he had the right to do that, not being a priest, but he was able to teach them things about exorcism. And he had said to me that he believed that all the demons who, or the angels who fell in heaven, the creatures that in the wars in heaven that were too good for hell, but too bad for heaven because they didn't necessarily rebel against God, but they stayed neutral, that God cast them all down to the earth. And this became the fairy folk, like the Fae, the Banshee, or the She, and all these mythical creatures that existed. And this is Catholic Church tradition and theology. And so I don't know about all of that, but I do believe that the Fae do exist, and the She to some extent. And so Native Americans will tell you that they exist. Reuben Fasthorse and I are going to talk about that very topic when I get him on the show not too long from now. So all of these kinds of characters that are out there when we talk about this stuff, um, there are. I was mentioning the Fae, that they were one of these cast of characters that could be very, very benevolent and good, and also be very evil. Evil, not just evil. They were evil, and they could do very nasty things to people. But some of this also was based in, like my own story, the rollicking adventures of Tam O'Hare, where he's looking for a young girl who's been stolen by the fairy folk. And one thing he finds is that the fairies, and I went along very closely with Irish Celtic lore on this, is that the Fae sometimes were known to steal children, and they would leave a changeling in the place, and that changeling was somehow a distorted form of the child that eventually died, or it appeared as the child dead in the night, who had died in their bed at night. And the tales say that they would put a glamour on something like a stick, the Fey folk would, and that stick would then take on the form of the dead child, and the parents would bury the child at a funeral and grieve over the child, and the child's gone before the glamour would wear off the stick, while the real child had been taken to the fairy realms. And that's like such a great evil, yet the Fae, according to the stories, did this because they loved the children, and they brought them with them. And so they could be very benevolent at times. They could help farmers, they could help people who were poor or lost. On the other hand, they could do great evil to people just for the fun of it. And so now you look at that and you say, that's mythology, yes. But this is the same type of thing I'm talking about, is that there are characters out there that anti-heroes seem to be something that the dark triad traded people enjoy more than others. A bookworm says, "Oh, you're talking about the scammers." Matt says they expose the scams for you to watch, so you can learn how to avoid them and not become a victim. Um, Bookworm says, "I like asking the scammers questions until they hang up on me. Like, do people really fall for this scam? Don't you ever feel guilty tricking people?" Oh, I love you, Kevin Miller. I do the same thing. I once had Pete was with me. He just walked out of the room. He was with me down in Texas a couple of years ago, where I did this very thing to a scammer. It was evident he didn't speak English as a first language, but spoke it very well. And I got to talking to him. I was like, "You're kidding me. I need to give you my social security number and make a payment today so I don't get arrested for tax fraud? Oh my goodness, I didn't know. What can I do?" And he would well, Mr. Roberts, you have to do this, you have to do that, and I need to get your social security number and I need to get your Visa card number, or you can make a payment on this today, or we will be sending the law out to pick you up. And finally, after I'd gone so far, Pete and I are just laughing, and Pete's recording it. And I said, I says, did your mom ever tell you not to scam people? I said, what would your mother think if she knew you were doing this for a living? And we got into that, and he stayed on the phone with me for almost 40 minutes. I think it's 38 minutes. It was amazing. Finally, I was the one who said, look, I got to go. And I said, you know what? You can give your heart to Jesus. I said, you can repent of your sin today. And I said, stop hurting people. And he says, okay, what do you think about that? And that's the way it ended. And so it's interesting. But yeah, they have scripts, and it's very elaborate. Yes, they do. I don't think I've been fooled by one of those yet, except maybe the Russian girl back in 2003 or 4. Anyway, she just needed money to come over here. But I happen to have friends. My mom knew a guy in downtown Moscow who lived in Moscow. She said she was in Moscow, and I said, "Hey, I got my friend Olav such and such who lives in Moscow." I said, "Why don't you go have coffee with him? He would like to meet you. Since you and I are going to get together, and I'm going to help you come over here, Olav is going to meet you. He's a Russian citizen. He lives in Moscow." And you know what? I never heard from that girl again. Go figure. But she was real. All right, let's go on. So why do people with these dark personality traits, the dark triad, tend to fall for the anti-hero? Um, this is in line with other research that's found that people's media preferences generally tend to reflect their personality traits. Who are your media personality? Like for me, maybe Captain Kirk was probably the one for me. And he was my hero as a kid and growing up. And it became more an appreciation of the character and the actor and so on. And does that say something about my personality type? That he was my hero. That I tend to find those kinds of characters heroic to me. What about you? Who do you find heroic? Who reflects your personality traits? Oh, Pete, by the way, since you're here, do you remember that time in Texas where we sat on the phone talking to that scammer? And it was glorious. I just told the story of that. And I said, if Pete were here, he'd comment on it. Yes, damn straight, damn straight. So they're straight from the Pete's mouth. I didn't say from the Peter's mouth because it's got entendre. It's straight from Pierre's mouth. So um, some people find that the media preferences generally tend to reflect their personality traits, the kinds of characters they link up with in their minds and that they appreciate or that they admire. And that's people's fantasy lives that are more likely to reflect their actual personalities rather than being explorations of what it would be like to be a completely different person. So, a number of highly popular shows on TV and movies have featured morally ambiguous characters as well as their protagonists. Can you guys think of some? I got some right off the top of my head right here. Do you ever watch the show Dexter? Remember Dexter? I thought I heard that's coming back too. But Dexter, he was a serial killer, but he was the hero of the show. You wanted him to win the girl. You wanted his relationships to go well. You wanted his life to work out. But you had Dexter Morgan in the show Dexter. How about Walter White in Breaking Bad? How many of you watched that series? I never really watched much of that, but I know who Walter White was. How about Deadpool and the comics of the same name, the movies and comics? So a salient feature of such characters is this ruthlessness and this willingness to use violent and aggressive means to meet their goals and become obstacles. And a number of studies have pointed out that such characters seem to possess personality traits that have been referred to as the dark triad traits, namely narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy. And I've I already talked about this dark triad in detail in a few of our other shows here this week. But to recap briefly, these traits share a common core of selfish and antagonistic attitudes and behavior. And psychopathy encompasses the callous disregard for the rights of other people. That's where we get our terms of psycho or psychotic activity. And then you have Machiavellianism, which involves this cynical, manipulative approach to social interactions. And then, of course, narcissism refers to grandiose sense of one's own superiority to others and a callousness that comes along with that. So there's a theory out there concerning these dark traits, this dark triad, is that they evolved as a social strategy to facilitate extracting resources from other people at as little cost to oneself as possible. In other words, through intimidation, manipulation. That's one of the theories out there. So, considering all the previous research that aggressive people are more likely to be more new, view violent content, a recent study considered whether people might be more likely to have an affinity for the anti-hero characters in media, any kind of media. We're talking television, movies, comic books, novels, whatever. If they're high in aggressive and antisocial traits themselves, they will find these characters laudable, somebody that they like and that they like to be and that they admire. And to this test, or to test this, a survey asked people about how often they watched anti-hero narratives and how much they enjoyed them. How much they enjoyed it when the anti-heroes acted out of revenge or personal gain, and how much they enjoyed it when they acted for the sake of revolution of helping society. So, like, look at The Sopranos. All the people that like Tony Soprano. You wanted to see him win. You wanted to see him do well. There's things Rainey and I watched just in recent days that seems to, recent months, that seem to evoke that anti-hero. And I'm trying to think of what those were. They were guys that did things that were on, and you notice that more in writing nowadays for these series and these movies and novels and things like that. That more and more characters have been made that really represent somebody that's overall out to do something good, but really they're just as bad. They write the evil or the dark side of these characters as well. Sherlock Holmes himself was a drug addict, a heroin addict. Yeah. Oh, yep. Yeah. There's that. Han Solo. As a matter of fact, he's not. What was the whole controversy over who shot first, Guido or Han Solo in the original Star Wars, the barroom scene, the cantina scene? They made a big deal out of making sure that everybody knew that Han Solo did not fire first in cold blood, that he responded. They even changed the original film to show Guido shooting first. And so that's how important it was for the filmmakers to let people know that Han Solo is a good guy. He wouldn't shoot the guy. But Han Solo, remember, he was a scoundrel and a scruffy nerf herder, and he was like a rum runner. He was a smuggler, and he was not a good man, but he had a good heart. He's like the hooker with the good heart, except he wasn't hooking. So he was smuggling. He was gambling. Cocaine is a hell of a drug, and can't blame Holmes. Yeah, well, that's true. I'm not blaming as much as I'm saying Sherlock Holmes shot up. And even in the original novels, that wasn't for people who thought that that was something that was an invention in the more recent movies, that's not so. That's the way Sir Arthur Conan Doyle created the character. He also had some good characters that were opium addicts, which is, of course, another opiate product. But back in the late 1800s, I'm trying to think of the characters I was thinking of that would visit. I remember the movie From Hell with Johnny Depp that came out, God, 10, 15 years ago now. The Jack the Ripper, he was one of the investigators on Jack the Ripper case, and he was an opiate addict. He would go to the opium dens. That's true. So perfect. Yeah, Superman's perfect. Captain America is perfect. Well, boys, I don't think we should do that. That's not what a Boy Scout would do. Whereas, you got, and Spider-Man was a kid. I don't think he was originally as young as they've made him now. But you look at some of the superheroes, they have their Achilles heels, all of them, because it was showing something they had to overcome. Like we said, like we already mentioned, Bruce Wayne, Batman. Bruce Wayne is a dark, twisted character when you think about it. But made so by the violence committed on his parents. But we admire those characters and we want to see them succeed. We don't want to see them fail. Now, in this study that I started to talk about, participants were told that an anti hero is a morally ambiguous protagonist whose actions and her motives were neither entirely heroic nor entirely villainous. They were also asked to identify a favorite anti hero character, or if they couldn't think of a favorite, to identify an anti hero with whom they were familiar. They were then asked how similar they felt themselves to if they were to have their nominated character, if they were to nominate their character, how much they wanted to be like him. Boy, I stammered that one out. How much they want to be like their character, their antisocial, anti-hero character, and not only be like them, but about their parasocial interaction with the character. That is, feeling like the character was a friend to them that they wished that they could meet in person. And they were also assessed on antisocial traits in this study, including the dark triad and general aggressiveness. How about you guys? While we're listening, you may have done some of this already along the way here, but name some of your anti-heroes that you admire. The Solo movie covers how Han learned to shoot first. There you go, Scott Allen. I actually liked that movie. I thought it was well done. And I thought you were able to adapt very quickly to the younger actor that played Han Solo in that movie. Iron Man is Captain America's anti-hero. Yes. Was Tony Stark an anti-hero? He had his demons to overcome, but I don't think he was so much an anti-hero. Yeah, he did go head to head with Captain America, though, Iowa. He turned a bit on the captain. Yep. Let's not forget the God of Abram, Beth Kirkham says, as an anti-hero. That's a very unique character that you bring up there, Beth. My son and I were talking about that very thing today. The name Abram came off the tip of my tongue today in talking about something, making some comparison. Oh, it was a client that was asking me all about stuff and about my son Samuel, and she said, "Oh, this is your son Samuel," and she said, God sent you here today to have me tell you something. And I thought, oh, here it comes. But she was actually very good to listen to. We had a good conversation, and she was talking about the God of Abram and the lineage, not the lineage, the genealogy of Abram. And so Daredevil, I don't know how much of an anti-hero he was. I used to like Daredevil way early on in my youth, back in my grade school days. My brother and some friends of his formed a little Daredevil club, I mean, that's back when we did that stuff. We were only a few years off of Father Knows Bests and Leave It to Beaver. So those are the days I grew up in. Tom Brady, somebody said. Um, I think there was an issue with Scotty talking about his family and personal life also, Steve. Oh, I don't know what got missed there. I missed something if Steve had a question about something. But did you have anti-heroes that you look at and you go, I like that? Uh, Matt Finn says, Dougius Stackius, the most Maximus. Doug Stack, good to see you. Doug Stack is Matt Finn's anti-hero because Doug Stack lives to do good, but at the same time, he's very evil. Do you cover your eyes and fight? Close your eyes and swing? Yeah, not me. So let's move on with this a little bit, or we won't even get through this because we've only got technically 5 minutes of this show left. Let's get into the rest of this. And so, in all the results of all these studies that they were doing, they found that the more frequent viewing of anti hero narratives was most strongly associated with the general aggressive person or general aggression in personality traits. And overall enjoyment of these narratives or enjoyment of helping motivations in anti hero stories wasn't particularly related to any of the antisocial traits, but enjoyment of the anti heroes motivated by revenge or personal gain was significantly associated with Machiavellianism and aggression. Oh, it's like here's a great anti hero. And those of you my age probably remember this. Remember Clint Eastwood's movie, The Outlaw Josie Wales? And we've seen so many themes built on this type of character. He was the anti hero. Even though he was a good man at heart, it's during the Civil War and post Civil War, and he's a Confederate soldier that finds that there were Union soldiers that raped and killed his wife and family. And that this group of Union soldiers was still going around doing the same thing post war. And yeah, it's a great one liner movie, if you're talking to me, Matt, or unless you're talking about Spawn. But the outlaw Josie Wales, he became an outlaw because what did he do? He started hunting down these men that killed his family. And you wanted to see him find every last one of those guys and put them to some kind of heinous death. Now it wasn't all heinous. He was a gunslinger. He became a gunslinger, and he hunted these men down. And that was the outlaw Josie Wales. And you would look at a more modern version of that was Anson Mount, who's going to be playing Captain Pike in the new Star Trek series. He was in a series a few years ago called Hell on Wheels on AMC or A&E, I think it was. And the building of the railroad in the Old West. And he had a very Josie Wales type of a character. He was a gunslinger. His family had been killed. He was a Confederate captain and so on. And it's his life as he tries to reform that, coming out of being an outlaw while still being one, really. He was an anti hero, but you wanted to see him succeed in everything that he did in that series. He was the hero of the show, but he was an anti hero. Now, perceived similarity to an anti hero was significantly associated in this study with aggression and psychopathy. Wishful identification wasn't particularly related to any of the antisocial traits, while parasocial interaction was significantly associated with Machiavellianism only. So, interestingly, although male participants in this study about antiheroes scored higher on antisocial traits than females, there were no particular sex differences in any of the other results. So, kind of to summarize this, affinity for anti-heroes was most strongly related to aggression, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy, while narcissism seemed to kind of take a back seat. It seemed less important in the worship or the following of anti-heroes. And this is interesting considering that Machiavellianism and psychopathy have been described as being the darkest members of the dark triad. when it comes to personality traits. And as narcissists tend to enjoy at least short term popularity and have high self esteem. So, affiliation with antiheroes tends to be associated with the very darkest traits. And so, this particular study, the findings of it are in line with these previous studies that have found that people's media preferences, media meaning books, TV, movies, and the like, tend to reflect their personality traits. What you like, and that's not a big surprise, I don't think, that we tend to be drawn to the things that are kind of like our personalities. That's what draws us to them. For example, one study found that people who prefer angry and violent movies tend to be lower in agreeableness. They're not very agreeable sorts, and they like the angry people, the violent people. Agreeableness is related to the quality of one's interpersonal relationships. Oh, by the way, I think of The Punisher. Have any of you seen the latest incarnation of The Punisher, which was the series that came out? I can't remember what channel it was on. It wasn't a pay channel, but it was one of the other channels. Netflix series. Thank you, Pete. And you saw the kind of character he was. He was a violent, vengeful, angry person. And he could kill you with his bare hands, a gun, a knife, anything he happened to have, if he felt you deserved it. And he was a bloody character. But you know what? He became popular in that show. Everybody was rooting for him. They weren't rooting for him to get caught and put in prison. So he didn't like. Yeah, yeah, that's true. That's the one way they redeemed the character. He didn't like killing, but he did it with him seeming consciencelessness. And so agreeableness is related to the quality of one's interpersonal relationships, such that people who are kind and considerate tend to be high in agreeableness, while those who are cynical, distrustful, and aggressive tend to be at the low end of agreeableness. And so, additionally, the dark traits are most particularly associated with low agreeableness. And therefore, these are people um, that show an evidence that their fantasy lives tend to reflect their personality traits. One study found that people who were prone to aggressive fantasies tended to be lower in agreeableness and were also more likely to admit to actual aggressive behavior of their own. And apart from pure fantasy, comparable results have been found for people's choices in fantasy role playing games. See, Pete's over here playing shoot 'em up games with a bunch of friends of his online. Got the headset on. They're killing people left and right. But they're nameless people, at least, and we know they're the enemy. They're all wearing masks and they're all the bad guys. So shooting them from a distance is a lot of fun. And maybe it gets out some of your aggression. Does it mean you're an aggressive person or it's a release from aggression? And so, in a study in which people were asked to design a character of their own choosing for use in an online Dungeons and Dragons or role playing style game, those with lower agreeableness were more likely to design evil rather than good or morally neutral characters. And similarly, another study on the occupations of people chosen fantasy role playing games found that people high in agreeableness tended to prefer character classes associated with religious and pro social roles, such as today I'll be a monk or a paladin or a cleric or a druid, while those in low agreeableness were drawn to antisocial occupations associated with death, such as an assassin or a necromancer or a dwarf or a troll. So I found this stuff pretty interesting because fantasy settings are unconstrained by moral demands of the real world. You sit and I haven't played it, but I sit and I watch Pete and I've watched my son playing Assassin's Creed, and he's playing this. Pete did one in ancient Egypt a couple of years ago. I watched him do, and because I wasn't playing, I was just enjoying the graphics and the brilliant 90 square miles of landscape that these characters could interact in. 90 square miles. And that my son was in a pirate one this last couple of days, and he's in like Nassau or something in the 1700s. And this character's running all through these streets, and I thought he could turn anywhere, and and it didn't end. And he pulled out and showed a map. How many acres or square miles was that city? Do you remember, Pete, in that game? I mean, it was crazy. It was Pete's looking it up, I think, or no, he's buried in his game. I'm interrupting. Is killing other people, killing the bad guys with masks. So, but those games, some of them are so widespread, it's unbelievable. What'd you say here, Iowa? Cobra Commander? Is he just misunderstood? Yeah, he's a misunderstood guy. Beth said, my therapist told me to write letters to people that have angered me and then to burn them. Okay, so now what do I do with all these letters? Better question. What do you do with all the ashes? What kind of pile of ashes do you have stacked up over there? Um, I have heard that there are things you can do with the ashes. You take bad things or things. I know there are spells like that. You write them down on paper. The simplest spell. You write it down on paper, fold it up, you burn it. Then you take the ashes out and spread it on the wind, and you let it go. There is a. Did you know that there is a spell for prosperity? And I did this once before when I was heading out to Utah a couple of years ago, 2.5 years ago. And I tried this because I had some good friends. Some of you know Travis Thorpe. He's been in here before. He's been, when Rocky and I were doing a show, he'd come over there quite a bit, comments on my wall and stuff like that on Facebook. Well, Travis is a pagan high priest. Now, Travis is former Army, former military police. He's a tough guy, and yet he's still a pagan priest. And he told me once, he says, you know what, you should do this little spell on prosperity. And he says, just a natural earth spell. And he said, you take a candle, big white candle, and preferably white, he said, and take some incense. And he told me whatever incense you want to burn, sage or incense. I would burn frankincense. And he says, you let that stick of resin frankincense burn. And while that's burning, he said, take this candle and take a knife or something sharp and carve into the wax of this candle imagery of the things you are visualizing, the things your intent for prosperity, for prospering. So I put in things like, a dollar sign or a treasure chest or a house I wanted to build or buy or money in the bank and things like that. And he also warned me, he said, be very careful what you wish for. He says, because sometimes, he said, you don't want to become asked to just become a millionaire. What if you become a millionaire at the expense of somebody dying to leave you the money? Then you lose the person but gain the money. And that was a simplistic sort of a warning, but he gave that to me. So I took the camel and I carved this imagery, and I looked for a sigil for prosperity and doing well and things like that, well-being. And he says, then by the time you've done this, he said, take the ash or take some oil. You had to get some oil. There was a certain kind he told me to get. Can't remember what it was, but he said, if you don't have it, you can use any kind of oil. So we used some oil that my wife used for massage or something, but it was an essential oil, and rubbed it on the candle. And then he said, then you take the ashes from the incense. This is what made me think of this, Beth. I'm talking about burning the bad things, and you take the ashes and you would rub it into the oil all around this candle, and let it settle into the recesses of what you've carved on the candle. And then you would set the candle down and you would light it, and you would then just let the candle burn till it was done burning. And this was supposed to be a prosperity spell. That made me think of that. It has nothing to do with anti-heroes, but it had to do with the The whole idea of the ashes. That's what that made me think of. So there you go. Let's see. Aquaman. I don't know. Was he considered an anti-hero in the new movie? No, wasn't an anti-hero. Okay. He had a falling out of some kind. So let's go on and we'll finish this. There's not much left of this. Um, Fantasy settings are constrained by the moral demands of the real world. So they give people an opportunity in fantasy to explore what it would be like to be a vastly different person. And in practice, though, people may not stray too far from their actual personality inclinations, even in fantasy. Remember, I told you that, boy, a good 30 years ago, I had some neighbors in Detroit that my ex-wife, the wife, the mother of my three older children, they were our neighbors downstairs in this big townhome complex that we lived in. And we used to get together almost every day. The meals, it would be like, who's cooking tonight between the four of us? And so we would um, hang out a lot together. And we also played Bree. She's on my Facebook friends still. We're both divorced from our spouses at this time, but we talked about this once. How 30 years ago we played Dungeons and Dragons, and she liked to create characters. And I mentioned this the other day. I created a character, it was Sanbalin the Druid, and he was missing a ring finger on his left hand because he was married to an evil witch, and he had to cut the finger off to get the enchanted ring off of his hand. So he was missing a finger on this hand, and he had a familiar who was embodied in a koala bear, Ned the koala bear. And that's all I remember about that character. And we made up stories and did our Dungeons and Dragons things around that. But I think it's interesting looking back in light of the whole anti-hero thing, how I chose a cleric of types, a druid. So and people high in agreeableness tend to have fantasies about characters who are noble and help others, while those with darker inclinations are more willing to imagine transgressing social taboos in their fantasies. And as well as waking fantasies, there's evidence that the content of people's dreams may to some extent reflect their personality traits. And one study found that people high in psychopathy and Machiavellianism reported more dreams with aggressive content, while another study found that people low in agreeableness and prone to aggressive behavior were more likely to report dreams about killing someone. How about you guys? You ever had dreams like that? Anybody over there in the chat room? You ever dreamed that you were a violent person? Not just committing a singular act of violence, but a violent type of a person? Double kill, team life, said Pete. That's a recent accomplishment of his. Now, one theory proposes that fantasies act as these scripts that allow a person to mentally rehearse behavioral patterns that we may have in our own minds. A parallel theory suggests that dreaming evolved as a platform in which to stimulate behaviors that can be used to deal with common problems. So, how do you deal with the nagging, I don't know, advertising salesman on your phone? You shoot them. So we fantasize, we dream about those things. My wife often dreams about zombies and fighting off zombies. Maybe that's how she feels about life. There's a lot of things in life that stress her out right now. So there's that. The dream she had the other night of being taken up, like when she was kind of in a sitting position backwards, taken up, and a voice saying, "Don't worry, we're healing you." What does that mean from her mind? So, from this perspective, media preferences may fulfill a similar function to fantasy, one that's not entirely detached from reality, but that stimulates personally relevant strivings. Fantasy and storytelling might serve to mentally stimulate solving particular problems in our lives. As I noted earlier, people with dark traits prefer a social strategy that uses aggressive and antisocial solutions to get their way. Um, the people who were putting on these studies found that people with dark traits were more likely to enjoy characters motivated by revenge. Similarly, revenge fantasies may be appealing to aggressive people as a mental simulation of how they'd like to solve their interpersonal issues. And I don't know, think about that. Hence, people with dark traits might feel an affinity for anti heroes because they simulate how these people would prefer to deal with their own problems. So, what do you think? Sometimes it would be nice to just strap on a couple of six shooters and take your big dagger with you and go take out all those people who are stressing you out and causing anxiety. Hey, MSC, I didn't see you sneak in there. Good to see you. So, uh, do you think that sometimes the dreams that we have, and sometimes the kind of antisocial characters that we enjoy and follow, might be reflections of what we wish we could do deep down inside? And that's why we're kind of okay with that. So, Iowa X doesn't cause any bad dreams to me, says Steve. So I'm not sure what that was in response to. Too much spicy food. Oh, it causes bad dreams. Yeah. I had spicy food tonight, spicier than I like to eat. I'm just kind of like, meh. So let's see. I'll run that theory by tonight and see how that goes. Field guy says I can dream about being a millionaire. Yeah, my son and I were fantasizing about that today. We passed a billboard that was giving the current Powerball and what's the other one, Mega Millions or something, numbers, and I said, "Wow, Powerball's at I think that was today, $78 million, which means if you won that jackpot, what would you walk away with? Roughly 50, 50 to $55 million, or have you already figured that one out?"
I haven't.
Oh yeah, what would you do if you won the lottery? That's a great
And then
idea.
you and I can
I like that.
freedom of
That's a good idea. What do you think about that, folks? Shoot me an email over at scottallenroberts@gmail.com or over on my Facebook page. You all know who are on Facebook, where to find that. Send me a message. Send me what you would fantasize. What would you do? Okay, do it on Facebook. Well, a lot of listeners here aren't on Facebook, but that sounds good. Why did you do that? Pete had a great idea. Pete's going to join me on Monday night's show, and he just invited himself. How about that? And so he's an IT guy. He can help me get it set up on all the stuff I'm lacking right now. So what if you had that kind of money? What would be your fantasy that you would do with it? Don't even treat it like a fantasy. Treat it like a real thing. If I actually had this in my hand, what would I do with it? I kind of know what I'd do. Uh, sorry, Pete, you'd have to look for another person to do what I'm doing. But I'd probably invest in your company though. So I'd go. I've got things. I'll talk about those on Monday. We'll talk about that. Fantasizing about winning the lottery. What would you do if you had that kind of thing? MSC says a big bag of stuff and a pizza. Don't tell me all this now. Got to share that on Monday, but share it to my email. I'll give you my email again. It's Scott Allen Roberts, just like my website, at gmail.com. That's the best place to send those. Send them to me by the end of the weekend, and we'll deal with those on Monday. Doug Stack says I don't dream about that much money because I know soon I will have that money. Well, there you go. You don't have to dream about it. You are visualizing it, and you're putting that energy out there. There you go. Mike Trout autographed rookie card. Hopefully, that wouldn't cost you $50 million. You know what I would do? I'm going to tell you one thing I would do, and I think I've mentioned this before. I would, on my property, I would have a big Quonset hut, not even a hut, Quonset building, a big hangar building, and I'd build sets of the original Star Trek sets, exacting replicas, kind of like what they have up in Fort Ticonderoga. That guy who did that, building the Desilu back studios. Oh, and by the way, while I'm mentioning that, did I mention this once before? Or did I just talk about mentioning it? Russ, who owns Odyssey Radio, and he also owns TrekFederation.com. That's his foundation that he founded, where they help people that are in need. And they've got a little Star Trek store and stuff like that, and it's neat little offices. And we talked about maybe this summer putting together a trip to take a bunch of people up to see the Star Trek sets in Fort Ticonderoga. And those sets were built as an exact replica off the blueprints of the old Desilu studios. Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz actually owned Star Trek at the beginning, and before Paramount took it over. And those sets, and they built those. You can go look it up. Look up Star Trek sets, Ticonderoga, New York, and you'll see the official website for that. So if you'd be interested in going with us, then let me know. And Russ and I'll see if we can put that together and see what we can do about that. All right, folks. That's about it for now. I've given you all your walking orders. Get your fantasies written down. What you would do with 78 million if you won that in one fell swoop and took it as cash? You'd get about $50 million out of that or thereabouts. Maybe even higher. Maybe closer to 60,000. I don't know though. What would you do if you had that kind of money suddenly in cash in your bank account? You could do whatever you wanted with it. I build Star Trek sets, but that isn't all I do. I have other things I do, but those are all in fantasy dreamland. Because while we may put the intention out, many of us know or kind of think we know, I'll probably never win that. Well, what would happen if you actually put the intention out and you won it? Let's discuss that on Monday. So let's see. I would love to share with so many people, says Michelle Cannon-Free. I'm not sure what that is in regards to, but that just came up in front of my face as I was scrolling through the chat room. Fix up my farm and then just relax, says Steve. That's a great fantasy, frankly. To know that you don't have to worry about certain things anymore, certain financial obligatory um, um, clutches or chains on your life, and suddenly you freed yourself from those. What would you do with that? I know the things I do. I know the things I do for my family. Things I do. I know the businesses I'd get into. I'd finally fund my comic book publishing company. My wife would fund we'd fund the lavender and the her berry patches and stuff. But those are all things that are on the top of our heads. What would you do? We'll talk about that on Monday. All right, guys, you have a great weekend. Do not be surprised if sometime tomorrow on Saturday you see an announcement that we're going to do a lousy cup of coffee, just for members only. So if you're not a member, go and join up. And remember, Sunday morning, I do not think we'll have Rainey with us this Sunday morning again, unless I can get some things set up before Sunday morning. It's doubtful. But if we get it all worked out, Rainey will be with us, or we might have her with us in one way or another. So be here for It's Sunday at 10 a.m. Eastern, 9 a.m. Central, 7 a.m. Left Coast time on Sunday morning. And until then, you guys have a great weekend. I appreciate your being here, and it's good seeing you. Thanks for spending your time with me. You know what? Live long and prosper. See you on Monday or Sunday.